Hi there, and welcome to The Wrap, simple news updates for busy people, brought to you by Sarah Evans, myself, Verashni Pillay, and the Explain.co.za team. In this week's edition, from Brackenfell to by-elections, is the DA losing face? In our big story this week, there was no dressing down for South Africa at the family meeting, and in our news briefs, we salute a true civil servant. Let's dive in. In our take this week, will the DA lose Cape Town? Now, the Brackenfell High School incident saw the DA doubling down on wooing back the conservative white voters it lost to the Freedom Front Plus in 2019. But at what cost? First, for the background. It's the latest in your favorite show to hate watch, South Africans Fighting Over Race. Some parents at the Western Cape school held a private matric function after the matric dance was cancelled thanks to COVID-19. The problem? Well, allegedly, only white pupils were invited. The EFF, always quick to jump up on a Twitter trend, protested at the school. Video footage shows learners' parents responding violently, leading to a clash. So, how did the DA-led provincial government respond? Well, Western Cape MEC for Education, Debbie Schaefer, tweeted, quote, "So if you have a private party and invite one race only, that is racial discrimination?" Yes, MEC, that would be the very textbook definition. And then came this gem from the party's official account. Quote, "The Nazis had the brown shirts that went about terrorizing the minorities. South Africa has the red shirts." That's right, the DA compared legal protests over the actions of some white South Africans to the Holocaust. As the South African Jewish Board of Deputies put it, it was, quote, "flippant and insensitive." Now, the question is not whether the DA has veered towards the right, because it clearly has. Instead, the question is this. Will this see the DA losing its hard-won majority in Cape Town or the Western Cape province? Because the conservative vote they're chasing could cost them both. There is little appetite in either the city or the province, more broadly, for the Freedom Front Plus's politics. That much is clear from the Freedom Front Plus's limited vote share. In the Cape Town City Council, it has just one of 251 seats, and in the Western Cape Parliament, it has just one of 42 seats. Now, the by-election results that came out this week show that the DA's new strategy is not going down well in these areas either, but more on that later. Yet the DA is moving to the right at the real risk of losing the centre, which is its majority. This without a viable opposition in the Western Cape to pick up that mantle. If it does that, it could cause serious instability for people in these areas. As we saw in Nelson Mandela Bay, citizens always lose in messy coalition governments. Whatever the DA's flaws, on the score of audit outcomes, it has performed better than other provinces. A stable government is also easier to engage with to advocate for better treatment of the poor. It's troubling for the DA to effectively cede power. Now, we were expecting another dressing down from President Cyril Ramaphosa in his Wednesday night address. Rumours flew for weeks that the government intended to send the country to the naughty corner before the festive season. But on Wednesday night, Cyril actually lifted some restrictions. In case you missed it, SA stays on level 1. The state of disaster is extended for another month, although the DA and the Freedom Front Plus have previously contested the legality of the extensions in court, but there's no evidence that government is using it for nefarious purposes. Travel restrictions to South Africa have been lifted for all countries, and normal trading hours for alcohol are back. However, Ramaphosa stressed that this was to help our economy slowly recover. It's not a sign that we're out of the COVID-19 woods. Government is still worried about a potential second wave, particularly in the Eastern Cape. Now, some measures are being ramped up, like intensifying contact tracing and testing and ensuring that hospitals are ready. Now, everyone has got Georgia's Stacey Abrams on their mind. US President-to-be Kamala Harris, Vice President-to-be Kamala Harris, is the black woman on everyone's mind right now, to channel Ray Charles's classic song. But it's another black woman who brought a midnight train full of success for the Democrats to Georgia. Okay, we'll stop with the Georgia-inspired music references, but to our point, another name you should know from the recent historic US elections is Stacey Abrams. She's an organizer who was on the list of potential vice presidential runners, although Joe Biden ultimately chose Harris. She is credited with mobilizing community organizers and bringing at least 800,000 voters to the polls last week. This ultimately gifted the state, which hasn't voted for the Democratic Party in 3 decades, to the Biden campaign and aided his ultimate victory. Abrams campaigned tirelessly against tactics to exclude certain, usually black and poor voters. This is called voter suppression, and it's pretty heinous. Her work and Harris's rise inspired us to look at 7 black women smashing glass ceilings, and you can read more about it on explain.coza. On to unemployment news. Unemployment increased from July to September this year because of COVID-19, even though more people were allowed back to work during the time as pandemic regulations were relaxed. Official unemployment is now at over 30% in the country. That means that 2.8 million people lost their jobs during that period, according to Statistics South Africa. Fortunately, as we reported previously, the government expects the economy to improve slightly in the next few months, and hopefully fewer jobs will be lost. Now, the governing party is fumbling its response to corruption again. In August, the ANC's top body, the NEC, promised a turning point against corruption with a step-aside rule, where officials accused of corruption would have to step down from their posts. But 2 officials have already ignored the rule, and now the party is faltering on the highest level. One of its top 6 leaders, Secretary General Ace Magashule, is being charged with corruption. Finally, after loads of claims around his impending arrest, he'll be appearing in the Mangaung Magistrates Court on Friday over one of many failures of oversight during his time as Free State Premier related to dodgy contracts. The party, realizing how big this is, addressed the media on Wednesday. It condemned corruption and banned ANC members from creating a ruckus outside court in party gear, but the ANC will not ask Magashule to step down. Magashule's deputy in the party, Jessie Duarte, told journalists that the NEC was taking serious legal counsel over the new step-aside rule. She said it got complicated when people just stepped aside and then were later cleared. But we're not sure how complicated that is. Surely they can just resume their work after being cleared. Duarte says the party will discuss it at the next NEC meeting, but it's incredibly disappointing. Pull the other one, Jessie. And now on to by-elections this week. South Africa has just had by-elections on steroids. By-elections are usually held all the time to replace vacated ward councillor seats, usually when that person dies or joins another political party. But COVID had put all those plans on hold since March. So on Wednesday, a whopping 455 voting stations were open for registered voters. Now look, by-elections aren't usually the sexiest of polls, and voter turnout is often low. But everyone was excited about this one, dubbing it Super Wednesday. It was potentially a measure of how voters feel their politicians have performed since March. This includes the ANC and government's handling of the pandemic, the DA's recent shifts towards the right, and the EFF's sometimes violent approach to race relations. But maybe it was the rain or just plain 2020 fatigue. It's been a long year. But turnout was even lower than usual. The headline news, however, is that the DA took a drubbing, especially in its usual strongholds. There it ceded ground to former DA Mayor Patricia de Lille's Good Party, amongst others. As one person put it very aptly on Twitter, it turns out giving everyone else the finger in an attempt to win back the hearts of a minority of voters lost to the FF Plus in the previous election is not an effective strategy in a culturally diverse country. Who knew? So, could this be the moment the world has been waiting for? Pharmaceutical companies Pfizer and BioNTech have just released the interim results of their vaccine trial, and the results are really promising. The vaccine has a 90% efficacy rate, which is a pharmacological term referencing success in a controlled setting. That's not to be confused with effectiveness, which is how the vaccine would perform in the real world. Now, the vaccine was given to nearly 22,000 people, according to The Conversation. The side effects? Nothing more severe than those experienced after the flu vaccine, it seems. But is there a way to know if this will be the case if millions of people get the vaccine? Well, scientists estimate that only 1 in 10,000 people are likely to have side effects. Some governments have already ordered stock, but this is by no means the end of the pandemic. Delivery will take a long time, and further trials are needed to make sure it can be rolled out on an international scale. So the optimism following Robert Mugabe's fall in Zimbabwe is truly over. The ZANU-PF government grows increasingly violent, and now it's trying to stop reports about its failings. Zimbabwean journalist Hopewell Chinono was arrested in July after a series of corruption exposés and charged with inciting Zimbabweans to revolt against the government. He was released on bail after spending 6 weeks in appalling conditions, but he was rearrested on November 3 and held in a maximum security prison before he was even charged. Chinono has again been charged with delaying justice after tweeting about a gold smuggling case. Chinono was asked in court this week to reveal his sources, but he refused. Bodies, including the European Union, have all come out in his support. On to US elections now. Sorry, Donald Trump, but you lost fair and square. That's right. Officials from both the Democratic and Republican parties told the New York Times that there was no evidence whatsoever of voter fraud in the US elections this week, despite claims from Trump and his allies that such fraud is why he lost. But the Trump campaign is not convinced, and the US's chief prosecutor, Attorney General William Barr, has controversially authorized an investigation into the voter fraud claims. Trump is also legally challenging the election outcomes in states across the country. Now, onto some homegrown news. South Africa has lost a man who served his country with integrity. Kimi Makwetu was the country's Auditor General for 7 years. He died on Wednesday following a battle with lung cancer. Makwetu was just 54, but he leaves behind an amazing legacy. He championed an overhaul of legislation to ensure corrupt officials could be referred for criminal investigation, and was in the process of handing over to Tsakane Maluleke, the country's first woman AG. Think of an Auditor General as the country's accountant-in-chief. They're responsible for checking that government departments spent their previous year's budget responsibly. But as News 24's Conita Hunter put it, for him, finding the problems after the fact was not good enough. He was hell-bent on creating systems that would preempt the misuse of state funds, and he did it with hope in his heart. Despite the rot he exposed year in and year out, he did not allow his frustration to overtake his optimism, Hunter wrote. Onto our accountability monitor, a probe is underway into Lottery Commission spending. Now, every time you play the lotto, your hard-earned rands go to the National Lotteries Commission, which is supposed to use them to help deserving non-profit organizations. But the Commission has allegedly been using the cash to prop up dodgy organizations, and that's why we're relieved to hear that President Ramaphosa has set the Special Investigating Unit on this important institution. The unit investigates claims of maladministration in the state and has the power to claim back money that might have been wasted. Grassroots reporting outlet GroundUp, which has been doggedly tracking these allegations, reports that the decision by Ramaphosa to involve the SIU comes in the wake of ongoing reporting of corruption involving lottery grants running into hundreds of millions of rand and mounting political pressure and calls by civil society for government to take action. With all the doom and gloom about corruption in the news, it's easy to forget that there's a task team made up of the country's top cops, prosecutors, and investigators from various agencies working behind the scenes. It is currently working on 200 fraud and corruption cases, Parliament heard this week. The cases are mainly in municipalities where a lot of corruption happens away from the national news. Good progress is being made by all accounts, although there are capacity challenges. This means we should be seeing more corruption cases coming through the courts soon, hopefully improving service delivery at the local government level, arguably the most important. And now, on to Britney's toxic legal arrangement. Imagine being legally downgraded to the status of a child. Well, that's what happened to pop star Britney Spears in 2008. Following difficulties with mental health and substance abuse, which were made very public, Spears was placed under a conservatorship led by her father. Under California state law, this is done when an adult is no longer mentally competent enough to run their own life or finances. The exact details are private, but this means she lost control over her vast assets and of making her own decisions. 12 years later, the 38-year-old is essentially considered a minor, despite continuing to perform and earn. Now Spears is refusing to perform after she lost her latest legal battle this week. She had filed papers to remove her father, whom her lawyer says she's afraid of as her conservator. She wanted a licensed professional in his place. This raises serious concerns about how mental health is perceived and a woman's agency. If someone as rich and powerful as Spears is treated this way, what hope is there for other women? But we have no doubt that this isn't the end of Britney's career. She is, after all, Britney, bitch. And that's it from us at The Wrap, product of Explain.coza. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to sign up for our updates at www.explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time.